the China Square menace or issue has brought out an aspect of Kenyans being exploited by Kenyans. So the opportunity has presented itself, and Kenyans are now busting and reacting to the China Square issue. Because as a country, we have decided to do away with industrialization. We want to create a market for these external countries or external industries. And all they do is produce, keep the money, and then bring it to us for us to buy. What do I mean? Hi, my name is Victor Ngatia. I am a businessman in this county of Nakuru. I'm in the leadership clique of this county. Very much interested in seeing things are done the way we expect. Accountability is one of the things that I really look at, and also looking at the development in our county and people delivery by our leaders. China Square, unfortunately, is not very positive on my end, in as much as I agree to some extent with Moses Kuria. First of all, I don't think as a cabinet secretary we want to see him blab just for political mileage or expediency. I mean, we are not in a contest for popularity in matters investments. I think he has an office, very much respected. And I am believing that if the Honorable Moses Kuria called the investor to his office, he would oblige. And a number of issues or concerns he would have had would have been handled well to avoid, raising alarm to other investors who are interested in this country. Number two, I agree with Moses Kuria. I don't think Kenyans need to have competition at the retail level. But then again, the China Square menace or issue has brought out an aspect of Kenyans being exploited by Kenyans. And that's an issue that should be regulated. The same way we ensure that insurance is not abusing or exploiting Kenyans. I think we need to also have a regulatory authority that will check on Kenyans being exploited. Because if you look at the percentage of exploitation just through a simple check, a commodity going for about 300 shillings in China, in Kenya will be sold at 950. And when a Chinese comes to Kenya and sells it at 500 shillings, it tells me that a Kenyan is exploiting Kenyans by a whopping 600 plus shillings on an item. So that's an indication that Kenyans should peak for regulation. And I'm thinking Moses Kuria is well informed currently. The reactions we are seeing from Kenyans is not necessarily because of a China Square. I think Kenyans have found a loophole that would give them a gap to bring out their frustrations. I mean, the China Square is not the only company that is bringing commodities from China. I mean, people are using Alibaba, people are using Jumia, and all these platforms to import things directly from China. And they're still getting the good prices. I think the China Square just made it real by bringing it on the ground, so that we do not necessarily just go via online. Now we are going to shop like you're going to a supermarket. All the items that we find at the supermarket and they are exploiting Kenyans are available at China Square. So the reaction is not necessarily that Kenyans are getting, because Kenyans will be reacting that they are protected by China Square by getting cheap products. The reaction is a gap or a loophole to bring out other frustrations in life or so that Kenyans are going through. And there are many. They come in many forms. We have fuel prices that keep escalating every other day. In as much as it's a world phenomenon currently that everything is just going up, Kenyans are frustrated by that price because it affects their food, it affects their transportation, and everything else. Even a farmer is crying because he cannot get his products to the market cheaply. People are crying over all sorts of things. Let's look at school fees. Currently, we have the government planning to triple the cost of education in universities. That's a frustration. So if they don't react, If they don't have an opportunity to react, then they will never react. But now, China Square gives them an opportunity to bring out that frustration. Kenyans are crying about the price of flour. I mean, which other opportunity do they get to bring out the cry? I mean, this is an opportunity to go on the streets and demonstrate. Kenyans are complaining about joblessness. I mean, if we are all not working, then where will we get food? So the opportunity has presented itself, and Kenyans are now busting and reacting to the China Square issue. And the people who are vocal are seen as traders. But deep down in them, they're not just traders. They have other frustrations as well. I mean, I think that question is very direct, and I think I should just quickly say, yes, we did. But then again, we also need to look at what pushed the government to passing such a law. Is it within the government's jurisdiction to decide on whether the importation will be done or not? Is it Parliament to decide, or is it the government to decide, the executive to decide? So if Parliament passed such a bill and it allowed, is it working against Kenya, or is it working for Kenya? But remember, if you look at the two issues here, importation of mitumba business, or of mitumbas, does not necessarily kill employment, because it creates employment as well. Because everybody else in the hustler narrative is doing mitumba business, and they're making something out of it, and they can eat, they can sleep, and they can educate their kids. But also the bigger picture is, it killed textile industries simply because we no longer have local market for what we produce in our textile industries. Now, so which is which? This is where Parliament comes into play. Now, if we are losing more than gaining, then we should pass a law that we should ban mitumba business. I don't want to quickly, because I've not researched heavily on how the company was registered, but I also want to believe from the few clips or the few forwards I've seen going around the social media, it may not be true, it could be false. I've seen that this company was registered. It has a certificate. So if it was registered, then it means Kenyan government took part in registering this company. So I would not want to blame the investor per se. I think I want to look at the body involved in registration. What agreements were put in place from the word go of what kind of business will be done? Because even when you're registering a company as a local investor, you will actually have to answer and tell the government, what do you intend to do in your business? So all these things must have been looked at. So, but I have a problem with how we perceive things as Kenyans, and how quickly we lose the foresight of what would happen in the event such a company sets base. I am sure we must have seen that these people are coming to sell their products locally. So we must have known that they will be cheaper than the local people who import again from them. So why would we go ahead and authorize them to retail? But I love that mistake, because it opens our eyes to realize that these goods that are now cheap through China Square have been cheaper all along. And these companies that are now complaining about China Square want to remain with the status quo of them exploiting Kenyans. So what should we do as Kenyans? I think this is a high time we push the government to have a regulatory authority that will check on these goods that are coming in. Because as a country, we have decided to do away with industrialization. We want to create a market for these external countries or external industries. And all they do is produce, keep the money, and then bring it to us for us to buy. What do I mean? Years back, we had something called Kenya Industrial Estates. And the least I remember is that we used to make bicycles. We used to call them black mambas. All these things were locally assembled. And something or somebody advised that we should do away with this local assembly and import. Now, how we made a judgment that importation was cheaper than local production, I may not understand today. And that is what we are seeing now, that has gone to this point of, we did away with black mamba. Why will we not do away with everything else and just bring China Square in each and every county in this country so that we consume like we wanted from the word go? I think this is just machozi ya mamba. We are making noise because we want to make noise, but the true essence of a Kenyan is not here. Because if it was here, we would not have killed our industries, we would not have pushed our investors, we would have put it clear that you do not produce, we do not import what we can produce locally. If we have the resources and we can do all these things, let's do it locally. And I challenge the cabinet secretary to look for ways of talking to these investors to bring the local production locally. We need to see these factories setting up, that they want to produce these particular materials they want to sell to Kenyans. We do not necessarily have to import them. Well, we don't have pros and cons. We have pros with having investors because they come and give us the capacity to do what we call value addition. There are no cons. Cons come in the moment we have a weak government, a government who cannot ensure that the investment is coming to benefit the Kenyan mwananchi. That's why we always put the questions to the government. What are they doing about this? What are they pushing? Are they discussing this in parliament? Because we have given them that power in parliament. So every investment that comes to this country should benefit the Kenyan mwananchi. But the moment it fails, it means somebody has overlooked and actually let these guys, instead of benefiting us, want to exploit. You know? So every investment is a plus for this country. But there must be regulation. We must have set limits and standards of up to where these people can do, or of what up to what these people can do. Because if we leave it open, then they will actually exploit us. If we want them to create employment for our people, we must create a proper environment for them to come and set up base. If taxation is an issue in this country, because that's another policy I'm not understanding, how this government wants to tax Kenyans to development. It doesn't work. Because if you look at how even other countries made it from third world to first world, they did not make it through taxing heavily their citizens. They actually made it easier for them. They lowered their taxes. They encouraged investment. People came and invested, and they started adding value to the local resource and grew the GDP to substantial levels. That's how countries develop. But a policy of overtaxing Kenyans does not work and will not work. Over and above that, I think we also need to think about tax collection, because I do not want Kenyans again to confuse tax collection and overtaxation. Tax collection is what is due. If we enforce collection, it does not mean we have added taxation. So we need to differentiate the two. And once we see the difference, then the country will be growing as opposed from retarding back. Retrogressing, that's a word.
Thank you so much for your time.
Asante sana.